Today, welcome. I'm Red Hawk, and we are here at the deep end where we're looking at those things and processes that life can't really do without. And what is life? What is the metaphysic? What's the whole thing? Well, we've talked about so many things. This is our almost 300th episode. We have over 5,000 downloads. It's been a trip. And my cohorts, Marianne Rudis from Spokane Valley, Bob Hayes from Florida, we have just had a gas. And today, me and my cohorts are going to discuss the road to enlightenment. Enlightenment. What is it? Of course, it depends on who you ask. If you ask Immanuel Kant, it's basically getting over our immaturity, over our youthful need to depend on others for in any way, and to use our own understanding for guidance. And I like the word mature because when you look it up, one of its main synonyms is ripe. And I'll be honest, I'm ripe. I'm getting ripe, but I don't consider myself enlightened, although I am definitely on the road. If you go to stay in the West and you talk about the age of reason, 18th century, 1700s, science and these new understandings began to shape the way we understand things and processes. And this is enlightenment. If you talk about the Enlightenment in the West, this is probably what you're going to get a lot of, especially when you look it up. When you look up in religion, well, it's about self-realization. It's about connecting with the real, authentic self. And we've talked about the spiritual journey, and that's pretty much what it is. In the East and West, it has to do with learning to move in accord with nature herself. But if you go to the East alone, the way that they get there is very different. It's not through necessarily self-realization and those kind of things. It's waking up. It's waking up. And of course, in Buddhism, you wake up to the self and you realize there is no self. And in the East, liberation beyond the reach of want, if you will. And being liberated from the wheels of karma, where you keep getting reborn. So enlightenment has all these many things, but today we're not going to discuss enlightenment and its many meanings, but what we see and mean and meet on the road to enlightenment. As one whose spiritual journey has been at least sincere, I will have to say that I keep thinking, oh, this is what enlightenment is. And of course it's not. It's just the next step. So this is what I've learned about me. Now, if you look up enlightenment, you can go to sites where they say, these are the signs that you're enlightened. You're happy, pain and pleasure no longer control your emotions, traffic jams don't get you in a tizzy anymore, you see life as a gift, you're not attached to your own stuff. You start liking silence. Apologies and forgiveness come easy. And it really is about how we appropriate these aspects. Now, some people spend their life trying to be happy. I'm not sure. I think Jung was onto something when he said it's not about happiness, it's about meaningfulness. And I think the Buddha was onto something when he said, attention, attention, attention. So today, we're going to be talking about on this road to enlightenment. And what I have learned for the last at least 35, 40 years is the road to enlightenment is learning to see past the way we're looking at things. In other words, the way you see it now, if you see it the same way tomorrow, you're missing it, because there's this piece that has to do with growing. It's a piece that has to do with a process with no real destination other than the moment itself. Again, be here now. It has to do with letting go. It has to do with metanoia, which basically is about deep-rooted change and seeing that and growing that in yourself. It has to do with letting go of the hold of want. Now, Carl Jung talked about the self. And what I've learned from Jung is an apple tree makes apples, an orange tree makes apples, the self makes selves. I think part of my understanding of this road to enlightenment is that the self is creating selves all the time. And yeah, there's a continuity, and you have to hold on to the continuity. But there is this percolating thing that's creating more selves, more perspectives. And I can honestly say, if you are the same person you were 5 years ago, you are probably not on the road to enlightenment. Because what I've learned, even as I grow old, the same does no longer, it won't work. It just doesn't work. There is a reaching aspect, and there is a moving in a chord aspect. And both of those, to me, are integral to the road to enlightenment. It has to do with stop making excuses for whatever. Do or don't what you do. And just, if you have to, in your head, make excuses, then you're missing it. This is from my perspective, okay? This is how I see it in my journey. So today we're going to really talk about the kinds of things and challenges that are on the road to this greater awareness. And whatever enlightenment is, it really does have to do with greater awareness, a larger picture, a larger understanding of who we are, and even the ability to let go of the understandings of who we are that we might reach. So the two pieces that I see that are integral on the road are reaching past ourselves and moving in accord. So the process of who we are and the process of what's going on outside of us, they can meet. And we're always reaching to deepen that, to find more ways to relate to it, to be more involved, if you will. And I think that that's part of the whole enlightenment thing. Whether it's a Buddha or a Jesus, what we can clearly say is they were in the world. And there are a lot of, monks and holy people, they withdraw from the world. But what I see about enlightenment, and maybe there's a time to withdraw, but for me, it's about being in the world. So, the kind of things and challenges on the road to greater awareness. What are these things? How do we talk about the road to enlightenment when we can't even agree really what enlightenment is? I think we can still talk about the road and to greater awareness. And to that end, I just threw my shotgun blast out there, and I'm going to let Marianne have first crack at responding. Road to enlightenment, Marianne. I think the three of us are on it, myself.
It's a long, long road, that's for sure. But I think for me, when I think of the word enlightenment, one of the definitions that I really like is being freed from illusion. And that we have so many ideas and things, the ways that we see the world that we've created. And to be able to kind of peel back those layers and to see the truth. And is there something out there that is a universal truth? I don't know. Or is it always moving and evolving? Again, I don't know. But I think one of the ways that we live this is by consciously being involved in our own life and consciously seeing what we do, mapping what we do, following the consequences, the natural consequences of what we have done, and making those adjustments. You said we're not the same person that, if we're the same person, then we're not growing. But I don't think it's possible to be the same person that we were yesterday, because every single thing that happens to us is going to make us see ourselves in a different way. And I really think that sometimes we forget that we ever thought something different, right? All of a sudden, I guess an ex-smoker would be kind of a good example. Once somebody was a smoker and then they quit, all of a sudden they see these evils of smoking, even though they partook of it for years and years and years. We forget that it was something that was part of who we were. And that's probably a really bad example. It's a kind of a mundane example.
I think it's a pretty good one.
It kind of popped into my head there, but but I also think that there are so many pressures outside of us that we're dealing with, and it's hard to kind of break through what is important and what isn't important. And I think that's part of the road to enlightenment, is when we start to learn to be discerning, to be able to prioritize how we spend our time and what we do with our time. And it's a continual growth process. So
Amen.
I don't think there's that shining star that we're going to hit.
Yeah, and again, I think you nailed it in that last sentence. It's a growth process.
Yeah.
Bob, what say you?
Well, I agree with most of what both of you have said. One thing that my study over the week has the conclusion that I've come to is the road is enlightenment. Enlightenment is not some place you get to. Enlightenment is a state of being. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of existing. And each one of us are on our own road that are moving through the universe. And a great definition of the universe that I came across was it is all of the co-equal beings and the relationships between them. That is the universe. And enlightenment is not a thing, or it's not a place, or it's not something that you get to. It's a way of being while you're on your road. And it's my favorite term for trying to capture this state of being enlightened while you're traveling on your journey is the Taoist concept of Wu Wei. And that basically means non-action. Doesn't mean you don't take action. It means you don't get wrapped up in the actions you're involved in. It means you understand how these relationships work and you endeavor to take the easiest, most efficient way of dealing with them. And also having trust in the universal intelligence that we all have in our being if we can become one with our journey. So I don't believe that there's something that you can get to. I don't believe that there's a road to enlightenment. I believe that enlightenment happens while you're on your road.
Yeah. And
I like that a lot.
Yeah. And to me, what it looks like to me is we have moments. We have waking moments, and they catapult us. And this is why I think the reaching aspect is so important, is that we, to me, that catapulting is so cool. It really sucks because sometimes you have to eat crow. Sometimes you have to back up in order to go forward. But at the same time, I think one of the things that, one of the articles I read, you don't have a problem apologizing or forgiving. I mean, it's kind of like, oh, okay. It looks more like an algorithm, and you're more indifferent and emotionally responsive to it, and more intended in terms of your response. And a couple things, you all said, Marianne, you talked about free of illusion. And I'm reminded of that Einstein thought, all sense of separation is optical delusion. And those moments when we see that our sense of separation is an illusion, is a delusion, and that we're part of it. There's one flesh, and we call it the universe. and we are one outpost for this infleshing and awareness. And it's kind of a cool thing to participate and dance with that in an intended way, even though it can create some anxiety from having to deal with the questions that there are no answers to. And again, expanding the self happens by the self-selfing. It creates more aspects of who you are. We've talked about Dharma and all that. It's trying to express itself. We've talked about psyche. It's trying to express itself in a way that is relevant to the universe, and the universe is made relevant to you. So after hearing you two, growing the self and connecting to the world, reaching and being in accord, those seem to be huge pieces on the road to enlightenment. And, Bob, what you said, it's a state of being. It's almost an attitude of being. And it's not even of being, but the process. You honor the process that's going on in you, and you see that what you call being is this frothing thing that is selving and creating thoughts and associations, and it does not stop until you're dead.
Well, and you don't fight against it. And yeah. I liked that you brought up that the whole idea of a non-action, wu-wee, and you go with it, and you become in accord with it. It's and you shift and change along the way. You don't have to defend who you are and what you are today. You just have to live who you are and what you are, and accept those changes as they come.
And you got to realize that you're going to be having an infinite number of interactions with an infinite number of people, things, situations. But it's how you react in that. Couple of things. One, when we see something in someone else and we get upset about it, we have to realize, and this gets back to Jung and others, that what we're really seeing is an aspect of ourself in that other person that is upsetting us. And when we realize that, we see every interaction as a learning process to see another aspect of ourself. And dare I say that the whole aspect of love and loving each other is the key to not judging others based upon what we think they're doing, but stepping back and looking at that relationship as a benefit to ourselves in our whole growth process. So, it's simple and it's complicated at the same time. A great paradox. And if we can love everybody, everything's great. But how do we do that?
An aspect of this is, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your neighbor as yourself. Well, we don't love ourselves. So how are we going to love our neighbor, much less a God? What I think is important to see in this road is that there is a struggle. There is a dilemma. Now, I'll be honest. I got old really fast. It's been 7 years, and I've shared some of this before. I haven't done any music except for little keys. Kept things real mellow because, arthritis, it all hurts. Oh, man, it sucks. And lately, I've been pushed by forces beyond me to start doing music again. And it hurts. But now I'm saying, screw it. I don't care if it hurts. So I'm in a dilemma now. Over the last 6 years, have I been percolating or have I just been a lazy sot? You see, that's a huge question for me in my own, being on my road, because I feel like I've been a lazy sot, and yet I feel also like I needed to sit and not do this for a while. And now I feel renewed in doing it, even though it hurts. So I think that there's a piece on this road that is not easy. I think when the Buddha tiptoed through his family, and snuck out to literally desert his whole family, all his responsibilities, everything he'd been bred for, in order to reach for something beyond himself and his own understandings. I think Jesus did the same thing on the justice front. It did not bear well for either of them, really, although the Buddha, they say, had his final enlightenment at the end. So I want us to see that there are a lot of decisions and struggles and dilemmas on the road to enlightenment. It is not an om, everything is wonderful, and I'm on the road and it's all good, and all those bad things are good too. And yeah, they might be, but that doesn't mean they're not bad. And it doesn't mean they don't hurt. And it doesn't mean there's not suffering. And it doesn't mean that you should not respond to all of that. And I think that that's part of the road to enlightenment. And that's the difference between East and West. In the West, there's a huge justice piece. In the East, there's a huge personal enlightenment piece. It's almost like they go together. What the East is doing inside, the West is trying to do outside. And I feel in that relationship that the planet is coming to something that is good, even though the struggle and dilemmas are many. I think Alan Watts, I can't remember what it was, but something East and West was a great book in terms of trying to put the East and West together and our understandings of enlightenment. I just broadened the whole picture, I know, in that.
Well,
It's Psychotherapy East and West, by the way, is the title of the book.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Go ahead, Mary Ann.
Well, I was just going to say, I think you brought up something that's really, really important. And when we look at our lives, when we sit and we judge our own lives, then we're judging others as well. But when we judge our own lives, rather than just accepting this is what our life is, and honestly, living life hurts. And when there's so many times where we need to retreat, we need to pull back, we need to find some respite, but then getting back out and forging relationships, daring to be wrong about something, daring to try something new. And it can, just life in general hurts. And I think as we get older, there is a tendency to want to kind of limit, it's like, okay, I've already done this, I've already done all of that, so where do I go from here? And for me, I have to continually remind myself that, okay, I still have a lot to learn, and I still have a lot of growing to do. And if I don't provide myself opportunities for those kind of for any kind of growth, then I'm not going to. And we start to limit ourselves, which again, I think is perfectly fine. If that's what someone chooses to do, then, I see friends that spend their time floating down the river and that's all they do. And it's like, oh, gosh, why am I out here trying to do all these other things, right? Instead of just taking it easy. But I want to challenge myself. I want to learn new things. I want to grab life and take whatever I can from it.
Amen.
But again, you got to remember that your road is different than their road.
Absolutely.
It's not that
yes.
it's any better or any worse.
Right.
Floating down the river is where they are in their journey right now.
Yep.
And you can interact with them as their journey crosses yours. And
I have to stop being jealous of them. That's
right. It's
a
state of mind. It's how you view what's going on around you. And that's the idea of wu-wei, is not judging others because you don't know what their road is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think a huge piece of this is change. And, Martin Luther said something really that I love. He said, go and sin boldly. And I like that. In other words, go and create more of these selves. Go and make lots of mistakes, because there's high yield in mistakes made in awareness when you're intentional. And I'll be honest, there's a part of this enlightenment that keeps me from believing my own thoughts all the way. And I think it helps create an opening, if you will, for the reaching to happen. Not just me reaching into the world and the universe, but the opening for the universe to reach into me. And I think that that's a huge piece of it. And another piece of this, based on our last podcast, Tidbits of Time, is we are trapped in these time constraints, and we're coming to the end of our time constraint here. So, Bob, in terms of the road to enlightenment and the challenges and the blisses and the turnings of new awareness, what are your final comments?
Well, again, I think that we're all journeying through this life in our own way, and the question of enlightenment is how we deal with the universe as we're going through this journey. And most of us don't deal all that well. We get worried, we get angry, we get depressed, and so forth. But it's the change of the way we look at the world that leads us to more enlightenment, if you will. And I think that, getting back to what you were just saying about thoughts, and what Marianne was talking about, getting rid of illusion, we got to realize that the biggest illusion that we encounter in our life is our own thoughts, because those are where we're trapped, and we have to learn to cut through the illusions we create for ourselves if we're going to become enlightened.
Amen. Marianne, final comments?
Yeah, I think that that was very good. I think one of the things, as we are traveling on this road and trying to be non-judgmental, not just of others, but of ourselves, recognizing that when we see something in someone else that we don't like, that we do have power of discernment. So we can make choices based on what it is that we actually do want in our lives. And I think that's part of, not only how we look at the world and see the world, but what we actually do. And those are, I think, our choices become very powerful in just at least identifying that there's possibly another way to see this, another way to do this. And I agree 100%, our thoughts can be our biggest trap. And so how do we kind of break that cycle? How do we move past these ruts that we get in? And it comes down to choosing something different. And we choose differently when we're exposed to different things. So I think it's part of it is noticing our own lives, noticing what we're doing is for me the first step, is seeing what I do on a consistent, our habits. What do we do on a consistent basis, and where is that leading us?
And both of you all, it comes down to this: when we're made aware to intentionally do something. If we don't, and I don't care if it's in our head or in the world, but to be made aware and to not respond, to me, is one, it's going to kill our democracy. Two, it keeps us from ourselves. And three, it keeps us from the next algorithm to see what the right mistakes are that we can learn from. And I think that that's all a part of this. And a part of it also, I'll tell you what, I've laid out some stuff here. You know, we came. This whole process of the deep end came from a radio show that I hosted, which is how do we just look at stuff? I mean, what's our? It's all best guess. When I was in divinity school studying theology, people were holding on to these theologies as if they were reality. Kind of like a mathematician thinking their math is what the universe really is, when it's really just an attempt to describe what the universe is trying to do. And so over and over, what I've seen is something amazing, and I don't know how to ground it because we're still left with the same questions. But next week, for our next podcast, I'm going to say what it looks like to me. I'm going to give you my view from before the beginning all the way to now, using the metaphysics that we've tried to develop and all of that, but just to say, hey, this is how I see it. Is it right? Is it wrong? Damned if I know, but this is my best guess. Just like all those theologies are our best guesses about what's going on in our relationship to the great oneness of being that we dare to call God or the Tao. So until then, my friends, blessings. Blessings.